Hello, this will be my first PVE guide. This video is specifically focusing on the spear. The spear is a very staple weapon. It's very versatile, brings a lot of utility, has quite high DPS, it's easy to pick up, whilst maintaining quite a high skill cap. If you just want the quick and dirty, I'll post the weapon masteries, attributes, artifacts and weapon perks here. Just as an overview, you can pause the video. Otherwise, I'll go into more depth in it in a second. Let's go over the spear masteries. So I would recommend to run Cyclone, Perforate and Skewer. You could run Sweep, Perforate and Skewer, but Cyclone has high survivability without much of a DPS fall off. If anything, in larger packs, Cyclone probably does more DPS. It has grit, you get stamina back, and with leeching the Cyclone, you will heal up every time you use it. It's definitely worth taking. If you wanted to run Sweep on your spear, I would recommend this setup. Drop the Deep Wound off of Skewer and pick up Refreshing Reach, because Coup de Grace counts as a heavy attack and you'll be getting the 15% cooldown reduction from using Sweep into Coup de Grace. Sweep is quite handy for the CC, and the bleed is quite significant when you're running Bleeding Sweep on your spear. This also means that you'll have to drop Enfeebling Skewer, a 47% weaken for 8 seconds. This is a must-have. You need at least one of these in each group. I personally would still stick with Cyclone, so you can run Enfeebling Skewer and also do high DPS with high survivability. Perforate in itself gives a lot of utility. You get a 30% rend and a 30% weaken. Skewer, obviously, you've got the Enfeebling Skewer for 47% weaken, but follow through. When you crit with follow through, which you want to try and crit with it all the time, you get a 20% empower for 10 seconds, which is very significant for DPS. Spear also has some refreshing built into it through refreshing jabs, so you want to make sure you're trying to do 1-2 light attack combos unless all your abilities are off cooldown. And every time you dodge, you want to be following that up with an ability to get that 20% cooldown reduction. One thing as well, Perforate has a pretty decent perk, but it's not a must-have. Run this on your armor if you've got space for it. It's a 30% fortify for 6 seconds. It's not a must-have as much anymore since they nerfed fortify, but it's still handy to have. So, moving on to the Great Axe. The Great Axe abilities, I mean, it's just your offhand for clumping. So as long as you have Maelstrom and Gravity Well, and you have Enfeebling Maelstrom on your Great Axe, you'll be set. Reap is quite good. It's good to pull the archers in that are kind of hanging out from the clumps, or someone who's running away. It's also good as a stagger, perhaps on the barrels during Dynasty. All you need to do is stagger the ads before they go to the barrel and they'll retarget. Charge is also good as an extra ability. You can swap it between running through groups if you need to have extra traversal. Bloodlust is quite good whilst you're running behind the tank. If you're aiming at any of the mobs with your Great Axe out, you'll be running faster. Moving on to the Rapier. The Rapier skills don't matter too much because the only time you'll be using a Rapier in the offhand is if you're using the finisher in the offhand for the extra damage bursting bleeding targets. But it does have some good utility with Flesh. This is good mobility. It goes through mobs, so if you're ever stuck in something, you can just flash straight through them. Vade is good. It's another iframe window. Just say for the Nereid fight and Barnacles, I will dodge and cancel into an evade to extend my iframe window. Riposte is also good. It negates quite a lot of mechanics, as long as you time it correctly. The passives don't matter too much. I just picked some up that might increase my damage if I ever hit someone whilst going through them. So for attributes, the best attribute split currently for the spear is 350 strength, 25 int, and the rest into dexterity. This is because the perk on 350 strength increases your ability damage by 10%, and also the final attack in your light attack chain by 10%. This is almost every single one of your attacks that you do with the spear, besides your first light attack, so it's very handy. But you are missing out on the 300 dexterity perk, which is the weapon swapping cleanse. If you want to go the dexterity build to get the weapon swapping cleanse, it is better to run 50 intellect, because the damage increase from this is beneficial enough. Then you would run 350 dexterity and the rest into strength. If you increase your con up to either 50 or 100, it's better to drop your intelligence down to 25. You still want to maintain the 200 strength perk, because that is a very important perk. At a stage above 50 con, you want to reduce this down from 350 to somewhere close to 300, whilst maintaining 200 strength at least. So that would look like this for 50 con, and this with 50 con is better than running strength at 50 con. Then for 100 con, it would look something like this. I wouldn't suggest running 100 con. You could probably run 15 con or 5 con, running medium and do more DPS. I haven't tested it recently since the last patch, but generally above like 70 con difference is when you break even swapping to medium. But the 50 con perk itself is quite handy, and it's not much of a DPS loss. So if you're just getting into melee, I would definitely recommend running 50 con, going 350 dex, and the rest into strength. The artifacts that I would suggest to run for your armor, I would suggest attuned pants, otherwise featherweight. Attuned pants give you the most DPS because you essentially get 10 free points into each of your attribute point slots. And with the spear, you're crossing over strength, dex, and intellect. Con is also beneficial to have a little bit extra of, but this means you essentially get 30 to 40 free attribute points, plus the additional attribute points that exist on the attuned pants themselves. This also lets you hit breakpoints a lot easier. The featherweight is a good option otherwise. It offers a lot more survivability. You get quite a lot more armor. Having the ability to wear heavy armor alongside the featherweight, I would suggest this, and running quite low cons still, if you're just getting used to melee DPSing. For the weapon, I would suggest using the finisher in the offhand, specifically for boss fights. Unless you already have a Great Axe Gravity Well in your group, you could run the finisher throughout the whole dungeon, but you don't want to be losing out on your clumping. But the finisher is amazing to have in the offhand with the spear. For jewelry, normally Endless Thirst is quite nice. It's quite good since they buffed it. There's not many other options. Blood Drinker is amazing for pub groups. If you're running low con, Blood Drinker only reduces your damage by 10%, not the listed 20% it says, and it offers high survivability. Otherwise, I would suggest specking Unk with fire protection, because fire mutations hit quite hard, and Unk provides a lot of extra healing when you use it. I would not suggest using Nature's Wrath. Nature's Wrath only provides an approximate 10% DPS increase, but you lose out on any proc Empower. This means you lose out on follow through, the 20% Empower buff, and it becomes quite a massive net loss. It's not worth it. For the spear rotation, you want to open up with Skewer if it's safe to do so. You can open up with Sweep if it's a riskier pull. But Skewer will net more DPS because you will open, or you want to try and crit with Skewer, so you can get follow through, the 20% Empower for 10 seconds. You will then follow up with Perforate. Perforate to apply the Weaken and the Rend, and then follow that up with Cyclone or Sweep. Between each of the abilities, you want to at least use 1 to 2 light attacks. 1 light attack if nothing else is on cooldown, 2 light attacks if anything else is on cooldown. The second light attack will give you 10% cooldown reduction, and will also have increased damage with 350 strength. If you're in a high risk pool, it might be more beneficial, as I said, to open up with Sweep and to roll between each of the abilities rather than light attack, so you get that I believe it's 20% cooldown reduction per ability used. It minimizes risk to you and increases the CC chain on the pack. For the perks on your armor, you would want Leeching Cyclone if you're running Cyclone, Fortifying Perforate, you want your 4 Refreshings, and Enchanted Ward. If you're lucky enough, you can also run Health on your gear. For your weapon perks on the Spear, you want either Enfeebling Skewer or Bleeding Sweep. Then Vicious. I would favor Vicious over Rogue because you would most likely not be getting Rogue enough to justify that small damage increase. And then either Keenly Jagged or Attunement. Keenly Jagged is easier to get naturally, but Attunement does more DPS. This concludes the Spear Guide. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. Otherwise, keep an eye out and I should have other guides coming out soon.